John's gospel is both beautiful, almost poetic, and at the same time, it's a little confusing. John seems to make a point, and then he goes on to make the same point, and then goes on to make the same point, each time with slightly different words. It's like listening to a homilist who repeats himself and makes the same point over and over. And because of this repetition, you kind of fade out, and then when you fade back in, you wonder, did I miss something? You can end up feeling a little confused. John's gospel is often referred to as the spiral gospel. Think of a spiral, perhaps a slinky. Remember slinkies? Do they still make slinkies? I used to love those things. Anyway, a slinky is a spiral. And to get from one end to the other, you've got to go over and over the track until you get to the final part of it. Now, St. John's gospel is like that. He may have only one main point, but he repeats it over and over again each time, offering you a slightly different perspective than what he's saying. Maybe this illustration will help. Think of a beautiful lighthouse, a tall, narrow structure with windows at various heights going all the way around to the very top. As you enter the door of the lighthouse, you begin to climb those spiral staircase. And before long, you come to a window. It's facing south. And you look out, and you see beautiful ocean seascape. You keep walking in the spiral staircase until you come to a window that's facing north. And this time, you see land, crops, and homes. You keep walking, and you stop at the east window, and you look out, and there's this beautiful mountain range. Finally, near the top, you come to a window facing west, and you see this ominous thunderclouds. And by this time, you might be a little confused. Where am I? A little disoriented. Then you get to the very top next to that shining light, and you get a glimpse of the whole panoramic of this beautiful landscape. And then it all makes sense. Through each window, you see only one aspect, but at the top, you get the whole picture. Back to John's gospel. We already know John is speaking of Jesus as the bread of life. So let's enter the lighthouse. You enter, you begin to ascend those spiral staircase. And at the south window, you see this. The bread that I will give is the bread for the world is my flesh. That's bread is his flesh. He must mean Holy Communion, the body and blood of Christ. Continuing to ascend, you come to the north window. And out of that one, you see, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. That's another clue. Receiving Holy Communion brings us eternal life. Next, you come to the east window, and what do you see? My flesh is real food, and my blood is real drink. Okay, now we're beginning to get it. Eating his flesh and drinking his blood, receiving communion, is truly nourishing and spiritually satisfying. Continuing up the staircase, we look out at the west window and we see whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me and I abide in them. He's talking about intimacy, a friendship with Jesus, developing that personal relationship with Christ. Finally, the very top next to that shining light, which is Jesus himself, you come to a clear understanding and appreciation of what Jesus means when he says, I am the bread of life. The Eucharist is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. Without the Eucharist, we cannot have eternal life. The Eucharist is food for our souls, and the Eucharist brings us into communion with Christ, whereas we develop a personal relationship with him. Because so many of us understand this, it has been especially difficult to have endured this forced fast from the Eucharist. However, because we understand this, we should also be spiritually mature enough to also understand that our fast was for the safety of others. It was truly have ascended to the top window and have developed that, if we truly have ascended to that top window and have developed a personal relationship with Jesus, we're fully aware that our friendship with Jesus is not just me and Jesus, it's always us and Jesus. According to Christ, the second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. The Christian does not live for themselves, but for others. It should be in that context that we ought to appreciate our fast from the Eucharist these past several weeks. That is now about to change. We will be reopening in July. We are uncertain about the guidelines that will be enforced, but it's time for us to gather again as a community and worship our God once again together. Now, if you are 65 or older and have pre-existing health conditions, you should seriously consider whether returning before a vaccine is available is the right choice for you and others. Some of you have told me that you will not feel comfortable in coming back until there is a vaccine. As I said in my latest update, I fully appreciate your concerns, and I would rather that you be safe than sorry. However, we cannot just ignore the fact that you're not here and are not receiving the grace of the Eucharist. Therefore, we're launching Operation Homebound, where those of you who won't be returning because of the above-mentioned age or health conditions will still be able to receive communion. For this to happen, we need many volunteers who would be willing to bring communion to those homebound, especially if you have family or neighbors who fit those categories. Would you be willing to help those who cannot safely be here still receive the grace of the Eucharist? If so, please contact Andrew Wolf, who along with Allison Powell are coordinating Operation Homebound. Likewise, if you're in the category mentioned above and you don't feel comfortable yet returning to church, but you still want to receive the Eucharist, then contact Andrew, who can assign someone to bring you Jesus in the Eucharist. Now, this is a time for all of us to pull together and demonstrate that we truly are disciples who make disciples. Let the church say,